Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, this one last time, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week, Arsenal did indeed end our Champions League run at the Parc des Princes against PSG, and drew one step closer to the conclusion of our Premier League season at Anfield against the league champions, Liverpool. Hello, Keith.
Hi, Dove.
Agreed. That kind of
week. We'll talk about this more a little bit, there is something different about the Champions League campaign ending as opposed to the league, because the league just kind of stops, right? You play your last game and maybe you already know who's won it, maybe you haven't, but the Champions League is much more much more like an American league with that playoff system that you're working your way through, and so like there is that moment of finality. You've been eliminated. You lost your last game. So yeah, there is something I find it takes a little bit more out of you to be eliminated from the Champions League than for the league itself, which is an interesting thing.
There's more of a finality to it. It's like this is it. That's also part of the excitement, though, I think, of that match, where it's and we kind of had that a little bit against Manchester City last season, where like if we won and they lost, we could have superseded them. But it is different when it's like a direct head-to-head competition. Right.
And I do think, because we'll probably spend a little bit more time on PSG than we will on Liverpool, but I do think, this Liverpool game, I imagine when the schedule came out, I mean, definitely loomed bigger in the collective imagination, especially through much of the first half of the season, right? When especially once City started to go through their struggles and have their problems, this was clearly, there was a real chance this game could mean something, and it turns out it didn't at all. So
yeah.
It was a very weird week. It was a very weird day, I have to say, at least as we record on our usual Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, meanwhile, it was kind of interesting for me. I looked up a little bit more about the League for Clubs that we talked about last week. So, I saw the home opener for Kingston Stockade, our local team. And I was just reading about the League for Clubs. Like you were looking up and saw that name and it kind of chuckled because it is a very silly name for a soccer league. Apparently, this is the first season of the League for Clubs. It is a new thing. So Kingston Stockade is a founding member of that organization. And apparently, I couldn't really find out too much about where they are in the pyramid, so to speak, but they did mention a pathway to the U.S. Open Cup. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's on the table. I guess that's something to root for, but we'll see.
My understanding is that they are it's a semi-pro league.
Yes. It is semi-pro. That is correct.
Right. So they're going to be, some of the players are going to be paid, and some of them are going to be, clocking off, or old school, like 1880s, like clocking off from your job and then coming out to the field.
Yeah.
Probably not too many of the Kingston Stockade are in, the textile mills as if it was 1870s England, but
Yeah. So, has there been any movement or rumors of movement in the transfer market as near the end of a season?
Yeah, you're going to hear a lot of this. The usual, we talked about how silly this was. There was a rumor that popped up this week about Madrid putting in a bid for David Raya, which sounded just so silly. So just again, be alert as always. Be prepared. Don't just run and jump everything. I saw some flying around, including, mostly from my perspective, third hand, not even really second hand, but it does seem as though Zubimendi is very likely to happen. It seems as though it's kind of moving. It has moved in that direction that he will actually come to Arsenal, which would be a big pickup for us. That'd be a nice pickup to sort of help solidify the midfield, especially since Jorginho, I think that was this week. It's been a very long week. I think I saw this week that he is officially, or I don't know if it was announced or is basically confirmed, he'll be going to Brazil when the season's over. So this will be the end of Jorginho's time with Arsenal. So
Interesting. Going to Brazil, that seems like a pretty big demotion as far as what we've talked about before with the club game there, right?
Oh yeah, I mean he is an older player at the tail end of his career. He does have Brazilian
going home, basically.
He is Italian. He was born and raised in Italy, but
right.
I mean, with the name suggests he is a Brazilian
some
extraction.
Family history there,
yeah. And he is playing. I want to say it was Flamengo. It was one of the big clubs in Brazil. Which, if you're a player with his pedigree, and it's one of the bigger clubs in Brazil, he's certainly going to be paid. Not as if he was going to the Saudis, for example, but he's certainly going to be paid well and is going to play at a relatively high level in Brazil. So yes, it's a step down, but I think it's also a suggestion, as we've kind of seen. Playing for a top club in Brazil might be more preferable to playing to a mid-tier club in, say, I don't know, Italy or Germany. That's kind of where that might be the choice he's considering at this stage.
Sure. And actually, some follow-up from Professor Wikipedia. Apparently he was born in Brazil, but moved to Italy at 15. So spent a not insignificant amount of time in Brazil. So
I thought he was born. I thought maybe I'm thinking of something else. So I thought he was born there, but of Brazilian, ancestry. Like,
right.
You look at the name Jorginho and think, obviously Brazil, but anyway. So
because of how it's spelled, if you remember when we played, was it Inter? I forget. It was one of our matches in the Champions League. We had Jorginho on our side spelled INHO, and then there's a Jorginho like INIO on the other team on the field at the same time. So
presuming this all goes through, then Zubimendi will Zubimendi will actually be the Thomas Partey replacement, and we've talked about Partey sort of being there have been ongoing talks with his contract. Partey would probably become more of the Jorginho replacement, although someone who would presumably play a little bit more than Jorginho has. Obviously, current injury notwithstanding, or whatever his health status is, but he would be Partey would sort of be dropping down the pecking order, I think.
Sure.
And we've gotten a good season out of him, but I do think it's fair to point out that he is, he is not the player he was when we first got him back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how that works out. So what is your percentage likelihood of a Zubimendi thing happening?
At this point, I'd say it's pretty high. I don't really do numbers, but that's because I'm not a math guy. I would say it feels pretty good. Again, it could all fall apart. Again, until the player is there in the in the training room, holding up the shirt and signing the contract. It isn't happening. You can't be sure it's happening. So
sure. All right.
Yeah, but I think Zubimendi feels good. So good to get a start on some of that summer business, and and start moving into that. And obviously, I suspect they have an idea of who their targets are, and we'll talk a little bit about this as we get into the games, the kinds of players they'll be targeting or should be targeting. So but having Zubimendi, potentially locked up is a nice way to start.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Well, let's head over to Paris for our discussion of the second leg of the semifinal round that we competed in and didn't get a result. I mean, it was better than the last match in that we scored, although the margin ended up the same.
Yes. 2-1 Paris Saint-Germain on the night, 3-1 on the tie. Yeah, this one hurt, especially given, as we talked about coming in, right? Our goal was to, we needed to win. And I think we did exactly to them what they did to us in the first leg. We blitzed them in about the first 20 minutes. And I think the key differentiating factor in this game really was Donnarumma.
Yeah, he was there blocking every shot we took in those first 10 minutes. Like, easily we would have had a goal had a different keeper been in there. And
made at least one outstanding save. I mean, a couple of them. But really, I'm thinking of the one Odegaard from distance. And he just sort of first of all, to see it, because you could tell it was screened and he reacts late. But to get his whole body down, and he's a tall man. So to get his whole body down and get a hand on that ball, he had a talk about it a little bit later. He had a save on Saka in the second half. That was just, it's one of the benefits of being a man who's that tall with that kind of wingspan. Like, that's, we'll say nice things about David Raya, but he is relatively short as far as keepers go, and he can't do that. That's just not, just the physical limitations of him. And I think Donnarumma, especially given especially given the way we dominated in the early stages at 10, 15 minutes, but it did feel, didn't it? We talked about this a little bit pre-show. It did feel just a little bit like some of what we've seen in the Premier League, that we're so close to cracking that game open, and we just can't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it breaks the other way.
Yeah, and then we fall to pieces.
And we said nice things about Partey earlier. That wasn't a very nice one. And it's Fabian Ruiz with an outstanding finish, and it's 1-0.
Yeah, he cleared it right up the middle. It was not what you expect to happen. It was very disappointing, and very much in the first part when we were on fire, it was very much like when they did the same thing to us, like you said, where it just made them look outclassed, like they didn't belong there, and we did. It just didn't last for very long.
And that was sort of the frustrating thing, is you watch that, and that's something you start to see develop in some games. And you see it. Obviously, soccer and hockey is a similar sport, and you'll pepper the goaltender with a lot of shots, and he keeps making those saves, and all of a sudden there's a moment. Sometimes you can't always tell when it is, but there's a moment where everybody gets a little frustrated, gets a little nervous, and they just they almost don't believe. You're going to see them shooting. They almost don't believe they can do it, and the keeper gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And even though you're dominating the game, you don't break through, and then all of a sudden they got one chance the other way. Now it wasn't the only chance they had the other way. They had shortly before the goal, they had a shot cracked off the bar. They were. But we had them on the ropes. And again, how different is this game if we're actually able to bury one of those chances? And we can say that. How many games this year can we say that about? How different is this game if we could just bury one of those early chances? But credit to Donnarumma, who I think was, and they had some quality throughout their side, obviously. But he I think was their most important player in the the MVP of the tie.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. Like, after each match, I kind of reflect and take notes about who would be my player of that match, and then I'm able to refer back to it when we record our show, and I have to pick who the player of the week was, because especially when it was multiple days ago, it gets a little hard to remember. But I was just thinking at that time, if I were picking player of the match for PSG, it's easy. It's definitely him. For us, it's a little bit harder, especially when you lose. It's always harder kind of picking who the most dangerous player was. But that would have been an easy one. But yeah, there are only very, very rare circumstances where I would pick someone from the other team as my player of the week. I think it was Matt Turner. I think one time I picked because he had just left Arsenal and had a good game, and I wanted to acknowledge him. But yeah. So one tactic that we utilized heavily that I don't really remember seeing before toward the beginning, which was a really dangerous tactic for us, it seemed to be working well and generating good chances, was Thomas Partey taking really long throws from near the corner. Like, who was it? It was Bournemouth, I think.
Bournemouth.
Yeah, they scored against us like that. So I don't know if that was the inspiration for hey, this should work for us. It's very much like a corner kick when you get that long throw into the box. It was a good idea. Do you expect and think we might see it more? We didn't against Liverpool, so we know that. But
I don't know. It was interesting because it does feel kind of like out of nowhere, but also, we don't take many deep throws like that. We talked about this last week, right? After Bournemouth, like the long throw really only works when the ball is in a very particular circumstance or situation. And a lot of times it feels like we get the ball in deep. Our goal is to get it back in as quick as possible. Lewis-Skelly or Ben White comes up and grabs it, or Timber, and then they do that awkward thing where they kind of stand there and sort of figure out where to go and all that. But I think it was an interesting one, and we talked a little bit about this. I think coming into this matchup, one of PSG's weaknesses is set piece defense. In a sense, that's I wouldn't have tried it against. I'm not sure I really would have tried it against Liverpool because their central defenders, Konaté and Van Dijk, are so good. I think PSG's defense is a little. We talk about this a little smaller than us. Some of our attackers. I think we were able to be a little more dangerous in those circumstances than we would otherwise be. And so I think that was partly played into why they went with that. And then you could see that sort of lost effectiveness kind of as the game went on, those throws just weren't getting into positions. They were able to adjust a little bit. So yeah, it was an interesting tactical wrinkle to see us throw into the game, but I don't know that there's any like long-term significance to read into it, I guess is the way to think about it.
Yeah, I could see that. So yeah, I guess time will tell. I mean, at least we know we have Partey who can make those throws. So it's a tool in the toolbox that they can consider. But so after the first goal was scored, like I know for me personally, and maybe you can speak to your own view on this, but it felt like we could still come back. Like it felt like with that fire that we'd shown in the beginning, like, look, if we just like, especially like in the second half, like, okay, go to the locker room, regroup, come back out swinging, we level it, we get one more, and all of a sudden we're like back in it. Right. But then the ref ran to the VAR screen and things took a turn. I started thinking, oh no.
Yeah, that was so. I missed the second half live. I was elsewhere, and so I kind of knew, based on some commentary and some things I'd read, I kind of knew what had happened.
Okay,
or at least had a rough idea of what had happened. But when you watch the video, when I was watching the game, watching back that second half, you see Saka go down in their box, and you almost think like, is that what they're reviewing? I would have
exactly what I thought. Yeah,
and part of me is like, I don't know about that because he's running away from goal, as I remember it.
Right.
And so I'm like, I don't know about that. I'll take it, of course, but I don't know about that. And then you could see the referee go, and at this point, I looked at the clock and I saw some people's timestamps, and I was like, oh, this is it. And you can. Like the broadcast clearly doesn't quite know what's going on. And you can see the referee go over to the VAR, and you can see on the screen as they're looking at Lewis-Skelly in the other box.
Yeah.
Because you watch it live, right? You watch it live. Nobody responds. Like, how often do you see balls fly into the box and all of the attacking players immediately are shouting for a handball?
Yep. I mean, tapping their arms. Yep.
Hakimi, I think, who takes the shot. He's looking right at it. He says nothing. He doesn't even acknowledge there might be anything. It was just so bizarre.
It doesn't even look like it changed the direction of the ball. Like it was one of the most bizarre handballs I've seen.
I mean, you can see it on the replay. He clearly hits him, and that's kind of the.
It touches his hand, but I feel like it deflects it. I guess it does deflect it a little bit. But what bothered me about it was it's the Champions League where they do have the notion of ball to hand instead of hand to ball, right? Because that looked to me like ball to hand. Like he was balancing himself. And,
but his arm is outstretched. It is. We can argue about natural position, but I mean, his hand is clearly extended away from his body. It hits him in the hand, no question.
Yeah.
Again, you could argue that it kind of falls under that category of it is unlucky. It does feel terrifically unlucky, right?
Yeah,
sort of falls in the category. Of course, that's what happened to us. Of course, it hits his hand. When he's in an awkward position, like Hakimi's not trying to shoot into his hand. Like there's no. It does feel unfortunate. But at the same time, I look at the replay and just say, I don't know. And you can almost see the referee is almost like apologizing, comes out. He's like, I'm sorry, I have to. He's right. I mean, what do you do with that? The only potential justice there in the world is the just dreadful penalty. It's so bad.
Yeah, it was. I mean, like the first thing that I noticed that was kind of funny to me. So I've never. It was what was the name of the player? That was
it was Vitinha.
Yeah, Vitinha. Like the first thing I noticed is as he was like holding the ball, getting ready to put it on the penalty spot. I was like, wait, is that like a size 7 ball instead of like the normal adult size 5 or something? Like it looked massive. Like he was a hobbit holding the ball or something. But so yeah, and I noticed his stature was really short. Which okay, fine, he can still kick as well as anybody else. But yeah, that. that was like, it was a very weak shot, and Raya went in the right direction. His stutter step did not throw Raya off at all.
No. Stutter. That's not a stutter step. I think I'm gonna turn this over. I'm gonna I'm gonna misquote it slightly, but I think Arsblog's comment was like that Elmer Fudd hunting Lewis-Skelly wabbits creeping up. He said some other words that I can't repeat on this show, but I mean that kind.
Yes, his approach was Elmer Fudd-esque, but there was an attempt at a stutter step toward the end.
What do they call it? It's in basketball. They'll shout the phrase "ball don't lie." Usually, if the guy gets free throws he doesn't deserve, and then he misses one, ball doesn't lie. Ball knew you shouldn't have gotten that. Yeah. That might be a ball don't lie moment right there. I mean, it's unfortunate. It is a penalty. I can't argue against it. But yeah, especially watching the run up, it's like, oh, come on.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when Saka tried the Panenka a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Where it's like, when he misses it, it looks really, really embarrassing. Yeah. If he sunk that, we'd be like, oh, that's so clever. I've never seen someone approach the ball like it's like he's Elmer Fudd. I can't get that image of Elmer Fudd out of my head now, but
there's a lot of that conversation going in about run-ups. You see guys doing stutter steps and movements, and some of it's a little like, what are you doing? Just kick the dang ball, man. Like,
yeah.
The Panenka's a different one. The Panenka's like, the Panenka is very cheeky. Like, if you hit that, it's you score that, it's well, what do you do about it? But yeah, if you miss, it's monstrously embarrassing.
Well, I see what you're saying, right? The run up was weird, but the kick itself was just bad, and not even attempting anything special, really.
And Raya's all over it. Makes a good save, and you'd think, okay, that's a big moment. That's a chance to turn this around, and then sure enough, 3 minutes later, they score and just.
Yeah.
And of course with Hakimi, I thought early on, Martinelli was really cooking him early on. Mm-hmm. In those first 20 minutes where we were having the run of the game, and then he kind of was able to grow into the game, and he is a really good player, which is annoying because we spoke a little bit about him. He played for Morocco in the this summer's Olympics and did very well, including torturing the US. And so I've got a lot of problems this season with Hakimi. Unfortunately, but
he's a dangerous defender. Like he's good on defense, and he also treks toward the goal a lot too.
Very much the modern wing back, modern fullback. Yeah. He gets upfield, and then so it's 2-0. And I know the broadcasters basically said that's it. That sends Paris to the final, which is obviously we know that obviously was true. But it's very interesting that just a couple of minutes later we finally got through, and Saka, who's had some outstanding chances, scores that, which was. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you really need that kind of ugly opportunity to sort of fall your way, especially when you can't score. I mean, think about how many good shots we had early on that ended up as big saves, and then here we are, with that, whatever that was,
right?
And that's where that's how we got the goal. So okay, fine, and I mean. See, to me, that's isn't where that's kind of one of those. Okay, you feel good about it, but it's a couple minutes later they get a break the other way. That ball comes into Saka in the box, and then
into
orbit.
I hear. I was going to say I hear NASA is still hunting for the ball.
Yeah. So I have
the British equivalent, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So as the American, my frame of reference for all of that is what we call a Wondolowski.
Okay.
This is a 2014 World Cup. The U.S. is playing Belgium in the round of 16, and they are hammering us. We absolutely did not deserve to be in extra time in that game. But Tim Howard was I think he had 16 saves and just an absurd performance. Anyway, he does his thing, and we have an opportunity in extra time. The game's tied at 1. Late, no, or maybe I think it may have even been late in regulation, late 1-1 game, and if the ball comes to Wondolowski, I mean, he's a forward. He's, I think, the all-time leading scorer in MLS for his career, and it comes to him right in the same position, and he just skies it. I mean, that's a goal he has scored 100 times, and he buries that. We have a thoroughly undeserved victory over Belgium and are into the quarterfinals of the World Cup, and he just skies it, and then we lose in extra time. But yeah, that was kind of the same thing. And to me, and they talked about this a little bit on the broadcast, I'm pretty sure you caught this. For us, this is the first time we've been in the semifinals. It says 16 years, which is a long time.
Yeah.
It makes me feel so old because I do remember those United games. But for PSG, this is not the first time they've been this deep. They went to the final in 2020. The 2020 season. They have been deep in this tournament many times. I mean, they had already won the French league. They had wrapped up the title. They were well on in this. They basically rotated 10 guys out of their lineup in their weekend game, the game of the previous weekend. Like this is the one trophy that's eluded them recently, and so. For them, like it means everything, and they've had a few high-profile meltdowns in knockout stages to teams like Barcelona and clubs like that. So, if Saka buries that, if it's 2-2 on the night and we're down a goal, and he missed that, what is the 80th minute? We're talking 15 minutes with Arsenal like all of a sudden running rampant again. I think this game's very different. Again, that was a massive opportunity. Like that could have, but again, as it was, we kind of missed that chance, and then the game kind of petered out a little bit. We never really were able to carve out another one of those chances, and they sort of settled in. They saw out the game, and it was over.
Yeah. There was a couple more chances. Ben White actually came a little close a couple times with a header and then an assist to Merino, or an attempted assist to Merino. But that was basically it at that point. Yeah, it was disappointing. It was I can see how it happened for Saka. Like the ball was kind of bouncing and he just kind of took it the way that he had to, and it was far from ideal. The ball was midair when he had to kick it, but
it's a tough position to be in. Donnarumma's come out charging him a bit too, so that's obviously going to play with his field of vision and his thought process and all that. I understand that, but obviously it just it hurt. That one hurt. I mean, overall, look, people can overrate expected goals, the XG statistic. I mean, for the tie for both games, we were basically even on XG. And
some consolation.
No, it is no consolation.
A little bit. To me, a little bit.
So I guess.
To me, the reason I would say it's a little bit of consolation is it's like, well, it kind of quantifies a little bit of things just breaking the wrong way for us sometimes, and the fact that we're generating those chances does speak to a certain level of quality, right? If we were completely outclassed, we wouldn't have matched them on XG.
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't take XG to the bank, but it means something. It doesn't mean a lot, but it means something.
Yeah. I mean, you can overstate it. I mean, I'm thinking back. Obviously, it's a good sign because I'm thinking back to our before last year when we were out of the Champions League for the years, going back to when we were when we were getting like torn apart by Barcelona and Bayern Munich. Like we were never in those games. Those games were massive, blowouts by superior sides. And this, it does speak, of course, to the fine margins that exist at this level and what you need. And it is cold comfort in the sense of obviously we are not going to be in the final. We're not going to have an opportunity for a trophy again. It's going to be another season without winning anything, which, you don't want to make the trophies the be all end all, but at a certain point you do want to win something.
Yeah.
And the Community Shield doesn't count. I like the Community Shield. I would rather have it than not, but the Community Shield doesn't count.
Yeah.
And it is frustrating for this group to come so close. We talked about this, the psychological weight of continuing to come up short, and how does that impact you going forward? And I do think there was a mental fatigue this season from having come so close, especially last year, so close in the league. And you kind of wonder, that you got to kind of take a step back, take stock, deep breaths, and be ready to go again. But it is okay, I think, as you say, to take comfort in the quality of our the relative quality of our performance, even as we're obviously both very frustrated that that is the end of it. And the fact is, the scoreline, I know the XG says it was an even game. I can't walk away from those games and say we deserve to win it.
No.
I mean, that's.
No.
I think is in the end they took the chances in a way that we just couldn't. They Donnarumma made the key saves when he needed to, and we're out, and they're going on to Munich in a couple of weeks. So congrats to them, and I probably won't be watching the said Champions League final. So I just hope everyone has fun.
Yeah, right. It was funny. I was out and about earlier today and saw someone wearing a Barcelona jersey, and I briefly commiserated with this stranger, like, "Oh, hey, yeah, it stinks. Bad luck on that, but I'm an Arsenal fan. I'm right there with you."
So earlier this morning was the El Clasico, the Real Madrid and Barcelona, and I mean, I'm not going to say I was rooting for a Meteor per se, but we don't need to follow that story up. But anyway, I guess what we should do, let's bring it back to Arsenal for a moment. I mean, we sort of talked about the kind of the end times and all, the end, that kind of that feeling of the season ending or the end of a run like that. I mean, I know we really only were one step further than last year, but here we are, the final four, the semifinals of the Champions League, the finals in sight. So for you, I'm kind of curious, especially I'm thinking relative to last season with the league, which is a very different kind of environment, a very different kind of process you go through. What was it like for you, the feelings you sort of have watching us go deep in the tournament as opposed to running the league down to the last day?
Yeah, well, this is the second tournament we went deepish in this season with, right? Mm-hmm. Like we bowed out in the quarterfinal round of the League Cup, which was the first time I've seen us really go down that far. That's how far we made it in the Champions League.
That was semifinals.
Oh, was semifinals. Yeah. Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we made it to the semifinals in 2 tournaments this season, right? Which that's something, and I think it's really interesting when you compare it to our Premier League performance, right? Where we just had draw after draw after draw, and that didn't happen here, right? We didn't go to penalties. The rounds that we advanced through, we just won outright. Yeah. And even in the league phase, right? We didn't have draws. Like we won. We did very well in the league phase. And I kind of wonder why, right? The same team, the same season, most of the same players playing those matches. What's different about that, right? And I wonder how much of it is like the mental angle you're talking about, where it's like, well, okay, look, the semifinals, it's 2 matches, right? Give it everything you've got and you move on, right? Whereas with the Premier League, it's like week after week after week. And it's like it's worn them down in a way where maybe having the specific approachable hurdles, they're able to rally around it and eke out a better performance or something,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of the reasons we've talked about is it's not so, there's a tactical and a mental difference between the two of them. And it is interesting, I think, how almost some teams would sort of use either competition or sometimes even the cups as sort of an opportunity for a fresh start, right? Like you're rolling through the league and all of a sudden you've dropped a couple points a few games in a row. Well, now you go to the Champions League. All right, just something different. You're 0-0 again. Like you're in a different place. Things are different. Or it could go the other way. If your Champions League, your European campaign starts to go poorly, it's okay. We got the league. We're still feeling good about that. I do think there's a tactical difference too. So many of the teams we see in England will go deep and defend stoutly and pack the box. And I think because of the nature of the teams we're playing in the Champions League, you're not going to see that as much. Look how many of them tried to open up and play with us. And I mean, obviously, a club like PSG, of course, can do that very well. Real Madrid, we outclass them, but they're certainly capable of playing that way. But we saw like PSV tried to do that, and it did not go so well.
So that's an interesting explanation. That it is just we're facing a different style of play in the Champions League, which incidentally puts us at an advantage. Which that's interesting.
In some ways it does. We talked about the differences in refereeing as well. Like we mentioned as well, they are refereed differently. And there are things, I mean, some of it's just the physicality. The physicality that's allowed in England is much higher than it is on the continent, and it's one of those things like everybody knows it's true, and you just kind of go with it, and it's nothing. There's nothing else to do. There's nothing to do about it. You just kind of go through it, you know.
But yeah, so I guess getting back to my feelings on the situation, like how does it feel exiting the Champions League versus like what's happened the last couple seasons and this season with the Premier League? I think in a way it's kind of easier to come to terms with because of the finality of, well, okay, that's it. Whereas, you know, like we've quoted on this show before from Ted Lasso, it's the hope that kills you, right? And, you know, there was a long stretch in the season where we really thought that we were just a few wins away from really challenging Liverpool this season. And the hope stayed just barely alive enough. Like, okay, yeah, we drew, but it's okay. You know, we still got next week. And it turns out, no, like we weren't going to do that this season, but like you kind of keep that hope alive a little bit longer, and you're just kind of slowly come to terms with that realization. Whereas, you know, yeah, they ripped the Band-Aid off, 3 whistles blew, and we're out of it. We're not going to be in the Champions League final. That was it. It was interesting. So, you know, with kind of the memory of PSG having faded a little bit, you know, the match happened today as we record on Sunday. The PSG match was 4 days ago on Wednesday. It was, you know, I've come to terms with it. Like we're talking about, the Band-Aid is ripped off. We're out of that competition. Yeah, it was, we talked about going into this match, the two kind of major variables. How is Liverpool approaching this? How hungover, literally or figuratively, are they from their victory that they clinched? And then us, are we maybe in the same mindset from having beaten PSG? Or are we looking to kind of prove that we actually are a good club after going out against PSG? We didn't know how this would go. And I'd say yes to both of those, depending on which half we're talking about.
Obviously the story of this game is the tale of two halves, so to speak. Certainly from Arsenal's perspective, I did think I wasn't sure how Liverpool would approach this one. There was clearly last weekend when they lost to Chelsea, like apparently by every comment. I mean, they sat a bunch of key players too, so there's clearly a sense that last week I think was their celebration week. And here, coming home, their first home game after having won the title, they ran out a really good lineup. So obviously this was a game they were taking seriously, and I'm sure internally there was probably a little bit of, you know, they kind of wanted to put their stamp on Arsenal to say, no, we are the champs. We want, because I mean, we're obviously much closer to them. You know, we're 15 points behind them right now. Obviously, it's, you know, we're well off the pace, but I mean, we're much closer to them as a competitor than Chelsea was, and I don't. I mean, in terms of points, not by too much, but I think, you know, there's an opportunity for Liverpool to really make a statement about themselves and where they are, and you know, it's just so difficult coming off the high, or the emotional highs, so to speak, of the Champions League, just to build up the anticipation, but also the game, and then the disappointment of going out and all of that. And I think, you know, there were, I don't think we showed it that much. I thought in the first half, I mean, let's be clear, I thought in the first half we were terrible. Like, let's not kid ourselves, we were bad, right? But at the same time, I do think there were some moments of danger to us, such that the problems we had, I don't think were a Champions League hangover.
So yeah, that manifested in a first half where we just kind of looked lost and not threatening, and all of the major chances were mostly coming from Liverpool. We just kind of, we're like in a funk, I guess, right?
Right, and I thought we played. Yeah, I mean, we didn't play particularly well. But I thought we were generating some things, and then very quickly it turned against us, and they scored those 2 goals very quickly. I mean, the first one's on the defense. They completely switched off. Gakpo should not be as open as he is in the box. That's just awful. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing we got rid of. That was the kind of thing that happened to Arsenal 3 or 4 years ago. It happened constantly, how we were getting beat on those restarts because we weren't focused, we weren't paying attention, and that's exactly what happened again. And it just, that one was so annoying and so frustrating, because that was a goal we didn't make, we didn't do anymore. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, they come right back and they get another one as well. Soboslai's shot/cross kind of trickles through, and it overall, I don't think as well defended as it needed to be. And all of a sudden, it's 2-0, and it's just it does feel like we're headed for an embarrassment, which it
looked like it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you talk about embarrassment. I mean, the way that like Raya kind of just lost his footing and fell over, which left the goal completely open for that second one. It was, not good.
Yeah, I think there were a lot at fault on that one. But I thought but just the way they were carved open like that, and then it really felt like they couldn't get back on their horse. They felt like they were jittery. They were behind the play. Their passes were going everywhere. They weren't settled on the ball. Liverpool was constantly able to break the other direction. It was just they were a mess, and it was just like, how do you get yourself to halftime? Because like this, post game, this was the quote from Arteta: "What we did in the first half is nowhere near the level. So to do it after that is not acceptable."
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've talked a lot about Arteta's and the psychology he employs and how he talks about his team and how he's generally very positive. Talks about how well they played and the good things they did and how we were so close and all of that. And you got to think a lot of that mimics the kind of messaging he gives them. He wants them to have a competitive but a positive atmosphere. This feels like the kind of halftime where what they would Ferguson call the blow dryer treatment, where just sometimes you got to just grab them by the shirt and say things that I can't say on this show. Like just sometimes you got to where was the pride? Where was the competitiveness? Where were their heads at? Like maybe they were in Paris, maybe they were on the beach, and at some point you just got to say, pull your head out of your nether regions and play the freaking game. Like, let's go. Like, come on. This is not who we are. This is not who you are. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And to their credit, whatever he said, maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was positive and uplifting. But whatever he said, I mean, we climbed back into this game, and almost right away, Martinelli puts it in.
Yeah, no, and you could tell even before that one that went in. I mean, like that was like just a couple minutes in, but even before that, we had another chance, right? Like it was good. Like we were, the fire was lit under us. You could tell. So.
Yeah, I mean, and Trossard's Martinelli's goal almost, it did seem to surprise everyone. Like Alisson kind of like half goes for it, like he's not quite sure where it is. And I think it was just kind of it was a good finish for Martinelli as a header. Mm-hmm. He doesn't head a lot of goals, and so I mean it was nice to finally get one. And then we followed it up, right? We didn't just we didn't just take our foot off the gas. We didn't act like we fine, we checked the box, we did something, now we can go home. We've talked so much this season about this team and how they deal with holding a lead and how many times we've dropped points from being ahead. This time we were the ones who decided to do the chasing, and Liverpool gave us opportunities. And, well, I mean, we took some of them. I mean, and a player who finally had a game that he hasn't had in a while, Martin Odegaard. I mean, set up that last goal. Took a shot. Alisson made a heck of a save. We were kind of groaning because he makes the save and knocks off the post. Like, oh, that was the chance. And then you see the only player coming to the ball is Merino, and
bam,
just punches it in. It's 2-2, and they're begging for offside. There was no offside. There was clearly on. There was no problem with that.
I think I thought that too, and I was like kind of pausing it to really study for a while. I think what they were talking about, or what? Actually, it was either that one or it was the free kick one, the free kick offside ruling from earlier in the match, or maybe later. I don't remember anymore. But so I think the question there was like Merino was close to being offside when he makes his run. The first shot was clearly onside a shot is always onside, but it was, so by the time Merino gets the ball, it was fine. It was that his run that gets him into the position where he can head it in was potentially offside. And actually, when they showed the graphic, the semi-automated graphic that we're starting to see sometimes, it was actually pretty close. It was kind of like the length of a toe that he was onside by. So, yeah.
It was close. It was close enough for them to check, but once you run that, I mean, we've seen much closer. And when you looked at it live, there was a sense that maybe his arm have been ahead of the defender, but I mean, you can't score with your arm, so that doesn't count. But it was nice to get, and honestly, at that point, 20 minutes, I was looking and thinking to myself, I mean, there's no reason we couldn't win this game.
Right.
There is zero reason we couldn't, because we were taking it to them. We were going after them, and then sure enough, that's when Merino, who had a mixed day, let's say, second yellow. That's a yellow. You got it. He has to do it. He's got to pull it out, and that's we can talk about the unfairness or the inconsistency in some of these, but the fact is we just take too many of these reds. We spend too much time playing with 10 men, and it's got. Last year we fixed it. Last year it stopped. It wasn't a problem, and look at that. We were a point away from the title.
Right.
But we just didn't have it.
I think there's a strong case to be made. We're not doing a full season retrospective yet, but I think there's a strong case to be made that those red cards are what sank our Premier League season. Like that was where things kind of started going downhill. Like that kind of deflated our momentum in some major matches that we should have won and didn't. It hurt us a lot. So I mean, we definitely need to look at in the off season.
It's a lot. I mean, it becomes a larger question, I think, of sort of availability of players. Because remember, and we're going to deal with this as well, Merino is not going to be out for the Newcastle game. Right. So you lose the player for the rest of the game and you're playing down a man, but you also lose that player for the next game. I mean, it cost us when we played Liverpool at home. Saliba was out for that game because of a red he had picked up against Bournemouth. A deserved one. I won't. I've said I don't argue with that one, but but then again, you also add in like Lewis-Skelly picking up the ridiculous red that he didn't deserve, that shouldn't have happened and was rescinded. But then again, 2 games later, he goes and picks up an actual legit red card. And like that just sort of thing just can't. Yeah. You keep putting yourself in that position, and that exacerbates that sense of exhaustion about players being in. And then you add in the injuries too. I have this theory, and we can talk about this more in a couple of weeks when it's finally all over. I have this theory that actually Gabriel Jesus may have been the most important injury we suffered. Him or Gabriel, and kind of what Gabby brings as a defender and to set pieces. And then what Jesus kind of brings in that center forward, can bring to that center forward position. Trossard was playing center forward today. When he was in the center, he was in the middle of the field. He was a little anonymous. He was good on the wings, but he's just not big enough for Premier League defenses.
That's true.
And then, then we had to spend the last effectively 15 minutes batting down the hatches. And
right, which that we could have very easily, like I could have seen a scoring in that period. It's frustrating that we don't get to see what would have happened otherwise. Yeah,
we had that chance. Odegaard had that one where he broke in. And for a guy who's having, again, players who struggled this year, Odegaard, between his injury and some other things. And actually, so close. So close. I mean, if he does put that in, I mean, yeah.
So
and instead,
speaking of late chances, they had their own.
Yeah, I mean, the corner comes in and Raya makes a heck of a save. Yeah. And then it's knocked in by Robertson and it's called back. Which you look on the replay and go, well, that was obvious. I mean, Kognate throws Lewis-Skelly into the ground
by his face.
I mean, there was. We weren't sure at first. Are they looking at a foul? Are they looking at offside? What is it? Because he scores and Robertson sort of turns and the linesman. He's clearly looking at the linesman. He's got his hand up, and so there's clearly something going on there. Now they're not offside. They show the replay. I'm like, no, they're all on. Those guys all looked onside to me.
Right.
But they kind of send that, then you see on the replay and, the way Lewis-Skelly is sent to the floor. Yeah, that was the right call.
It actually reminded me of an earlier non-call against Myles Lewis-Skelly. Did you notice? It was in the first half. It was like in the 17th minute. I don't remember. I didn't note which Liverpool player it was, but they showed a replay of it after the fact, after the whistle wasn't blown, where a player had his hand around Myles Lewis-Skelly's throat and pushed him down by his throat to the ground.
Was it Lewis-Skelly or was it Saka you're looking at?
I thought that was Lewis-Skelly, unless you know what? I'm remembering it wrong. I have it written down as Saka. It was Saka.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Saka gets fouled and there's no call is kind of the dog bites man story of Arsenal. But I mean.
But I guess what was particularly annoying about that is it was right in front of a linesman. Like the linesman saw what happened and didn't say anything. It was that was a little annoying. But
but oddly enough, it feels like an oddly deserved 2-2. It's nice to have a draw that actually draws they feel like wins and draws they feel like losses. It was nice to have a draw that actually felt like a little bit more like a win for once. 14 is way too draws, but I mean, to have come back against Liverpool. I mean, that Liverpool didn't beat us this season,
right? Same thing with Manchester City last season. Like, they didn't beat us. Like it's interesting that it's worked out that way. That like we have something to hang our hats on and say, look, things didn't go our way this season, but when it came down to it, when we had our head-to-head competitions with these championship teams. And it's funny saying that, remembering that there is a league down called the Championship, but like these champion teams that we did come out ahead. That's something that's not insignificant,
Yeah, and there are. I mean, that's sort of what leads to the frustration about so much of this, right? That you feel like the club deserves more against the top competition. We're very good. That like we're obviously a talented and capable team, but it's not those teams that are a problem. It's the others, because you look at us against the top competition, in the league. I mean, the so-called Big Six, right? I mean, Chelsea we beat. I had a win and a draw. I think we have 2 draws against Forest. We had a win and a draw against City. Just trying to scroll through the schedule here. We beat Spurs twice. Villa, I think we beat twice, or had at least a win and a draw, if not 2 wins. Like, we don't lose to those teams.
Yeah.
And that says something too, about, our capabilities, how good this team can be. But it's that next step. It's that consistency we've got to make sure we have. Yeah, Newcastle really seems to be the only one that we can't seem to get one over on, which is very annoying. But we'll talk about that more in just a second.
Yeah. So a couple final notes on this match. For one thing, no Declan Rice, and I didn't see him on the bench or on the sidelines even. Do you know what's up with him?
Supposedly, based on pregame conversation, he picked up a knock of some kind in the PSG game. I don't really know any more than that. So he was out. It's hard to say because, again, as we look forward and sort of thinking about how we're going to approach these last couple of games, really in the case of the 3 games, for us, the 2 we have left, it is going to be kind of interesting. I suspect you're going to see a few guys sitting a little bit more than you might not expect, and the reason being they have injuries that they've been nursing that they don't want to tell us about. The club didn't want to say anything about, and now that we are effectively... I believe if we get 1 point in our 2 remaining games, in Newcastle at home, Southampton away, if we get 1 point, we're guaranteed the Champions League next year. Now, having said that, even if we were to drop both of those games, I think us to finish out of the Champions League would require like a level of strong performance and consistency from City, Chelsea, Villa, Newcastle that we just haven't seen from them this season. They haven't put off this season as well. Mm-hmm. So I think we're not clinched, but I think we can feel pretty good about being officially being in the Champions League for next season, especially given our final game is away to Southampton, who is not the worst team in Premier League history, thanks to their draw against City this weekend, but is pretty bad.
Yeah. One final note that was just kind of funny, made me chuckle a little bit watching this Liverpool match is I hadn't really noticed it before, but if you can picture, and I'll do my best to put a picture of it when I post a video, the Premier League ball this season, it has, it's a mostly white ball and it has like some concentric rings, like some parallel rings to each other, like, 3 or 4 of them on the ball. And I started noticing as I was looking at how David Raya was placing the ball when he went to take his goal kicks, he would always have it so that the rings were like perfectly like parallel to the ground, like the ball. Like if you were taking a photo of that ball, right, you didn't want the rings like kind of at an odd angle or like vertical. They would always be perfectly horizontal, lined up like parallel to the ground. And the first time it happened, I was like, oh, well, maybe it just landed that way. But I started noticing it multiple times. It's just kind of funny because, we see that everybody has their rituals as far as how they place the ball. They'll very often like toss it forward with a backspin to stop it from rolling forward. And then, we've seen like Declan Rice when he's taking his corner kicks, how he has to have it just forward of a line, just enough that a referee like once or twice has blown the whistle and told him to like bring it back a little bit. Like they have their own peculiarities. And it's just kind of funny because that's something that doesn't affect the way the ball moves at all. It's a round ball. It doesn't matter which way it's facing. It's just kind of that level of attention to how you do it.
I mean, there is an element of it too, based on the stitching and the panels on it, that does sort of have an impact on the trajectory of the ball. Or it could just be as simple as the way he places it. We see it as a line parallel, but he's looking at a different point on the ball, and he's somehow,
interesting,
in the course of his kicking, has decided that that's what he just likes it. We talk about
that. Could be. It could be that there's like something that like he knows he wants his foot, like he uses it to gauge where he wants his foot to strike or something. There's some graphic on it that he wants centered toward him that he uses to gauge where he kicks it. That's a good point. That's a lot more flattering to him if that's the case.
Yeah, and athletes are relatively superstitious, and goalkeepers or keepers and also goalies in hockey are also ridiculously superstitious. They're
okay.
Hockey goalies are weird, but in like a fun way most of the time.
Yeah. So who is your player of this vexing week?
I'm going to go with a guy who I don't think we've talked about as much, and I think he's kind of been a little bit overlooked because we spent so much time looking at the forward side of the field. I'm going to say David Raya. I thought he made a number of key saves, and as much as you can criticize a guy for conceding 5 goals in a week, I thought it's hard for me to be super critical with the way those goals went, especially when you consider some of the saves he made to keep us in both of these games, obviously in vain when it came to PSG, but obviously to great effect at Anfield. I think he made some key saves, and even the penalty too. We've made a lot of fun of Vitinha's run up, but it is a good save to make. He goes the right way. He's all over the ball. I think Raya to me in spite of the result, had a good week.
Yeah, no, it's a good week to pick Raya. I'm right there with you. It's not my choice. I'll get my first choice pick this week. But no, good shout. I could see that, especially the penalty save definitely puts it over the top. I would say so. I was in a more attacking mindset, like trying to think who got us closest to pulling ahead of PSG and Liverpool, and focusing briefly on Liverpool first. For the first half, like I noticed some good play from Merino, getting the ball back away from Liverpool, like getting us possession back. Then he went and got himself a second yellow, and there's no way I can pick Liverpool for the week, or pick Merino. For the week. And then Trossard was clearly a key part of drawing even with Liverpool. A big part in the first half, 1 or 2 chances that we had, but then especially in drawing that first goal, and I think maybe the second goal. He had some build up contributions, but. Trossard was good, but I think the most consistent player across both matches for me as far as danger and scoring was Martinelli. Martinelli was in really good form this week. Just really committed, keeping the energy up the whole time, just keeping things moving toward the goal at every opportunity, doing the types of things that we know he does, the fast runs, and just good crosses, like you said, like a header goal from him, which is very uncharacteristic, but he did well. He placed that header perfectly because he had to beat the keeper under limited circumstances there. And the look you can imagine, you can't quite read it from the camera, but the look you imagine on Alisson's face of huh? They are scoring against us. How dare they? It was overall I would pick Martinelli for this week.
Not a bad pick. I thought he had some good moments throughout the week, but unfortunately he's one of those. I do feel at times he starts to disappear as the game goes on. He kind of needs to score early on, but that's not a Martinelli problem. That's an Arsenal problem. But anyway, I'm not gonna rag on your pick on that one. Martinelli.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I felt like in the PSG match in particular, it felt to me like he did keep the energy up more than he typically does, where he did stay a threat later in the game than you often see. So one thing that we were kind of talking about as we planned out the show a little bit that I wanted to get your thoughts on was so we know we're not going to be number one in the league, right? That was decided a couple weeks ago. But to me, there's still some meaning in being number two. Like, I guess maybe it's my perspective of just not wanting to regress. Like, we've worked really hard to get to be number two the past 2 seasons running, and it would feel like a bigger blow in some ways to get a bigger blow than getting eliminated from the Champions League to get knocked down a peg in the Premier League, which in some ways it's one of the most remarkable things about our season, that as poor as we've been, we are still number two. We had so few losses that the draws overall, didn't hurt us so much to knock us out of that spot. But so as we get closer to playing Newcastle, who as we speak are number 3 in the table, behind us by only 2 points. So a defeat to them would draw them. We'd swap places. They'd become number 2. We'd become number 3, and it could end up that way. That would be something I really don't want to see. Like, I really do want to see us beat Newcastle. I do really want to see us stay in number 2. But it seems like it might maybe matter a little bit more to me than to you.
Well, I mean, in terms of Newcastle, we talked about our strong record against teams at the top. That is, by the way, barring Newcastle, who has beaten us 3 times this season.
Yeah.
Both legs of the Carabao Cup semi-final and then the league game we played up at St. James's Park. So we'll get them at home. They are 2 points behind us, and yes, if they were to win on next Sunday, they would jump us in the table. I mean, there is something to be said about pride of place. I won't begrudge you for wanting second as opposed to third or fourth. But as we have talked about this a little bit as well, like when the season begins, there's only 2 teams who can win the title. There's Arsenal and there's not Arsenal. And if it's not Arsenal, it is not Arsenal. Then I don't want to say I don't care, but to me, the next thing that becomes important isn't so much the particular placement as it is securing qualification for the Champions League for next season. And so as long as we are able to do that, I cannot lose a lot of sleep, or any at all, if we wind up in third or even potentially fourth. Would it be annoying to finish behind Newcastle? Yes, because I think we're better than them, even though we can't seem to beat them for some reason. Would it be annoying to finish behind City, especially given this is the worst City team we've seen in 5 or 6, like a decade? Yes, that would be very annoying. Technically, we could finish behind Chelsea or Aston Villa, but that's not going to happen. Just stop it. Just please, log off, go outside, read a book, do something else. That's not going to happen. But at the end of the day, we're a point away from clinching a spot in the Champions League, and I guess to a certain extent, this is where I fall into the Ricky Bobby school. If you're not first, you're last. I mean, so we finished in second or third. Who cares? We didn't win, and I do think it says something about the position we're in as a club that. This is, I know, just my perspective on this, but it does say something about where we are as a club that you could look at that and say, yeah, but we didn't win. Second, third, who cares? We didn't win. And that's, we're in a position we should feel, we'll talk about this more in a couple weeks, we should feel a little disappointed about finishing in second or third, about not winning. And it says a lot about where our expectations as a club are.
Yeah, I guess I'm just coming at it from the perspective of I started watching the club not long after Arteta became manager, right? It was his second or third season that I started watching. The 22-23 season, I don't remember, but and it felt like each season I've seen so far has built on the ones before it, right? The first season we were in the Europa League, the second, and we made it to the quarterfinal. The second season we're in the Champions League and made it to the quarterfinal. Both times we made it to second place in the Premier League, which was better than we'd done in any season in recent memory before that. And it just feels like, and so this season we made progress in the Champions League. We went even deeper. We went to a semi-final. It feels like it would be a step backwards that this team doesn't deserve, because they are still doing really well. And I'm hoping, and we've said before, deserve's got nothing to do with it, but it feels like it doesn't reflect the level of this team. It would be a shame, and especially because I know how much flack Arteta is going to get for it. Like, should that happen? That's just like another thing for people who want him out might use as justification for feeling that way. And I don't want him out. Like, I want to give him, a few more years to do what he wants to do. And I want to see us at the top. And I think we could be, and it would be a shame if just slipping by a place like alters that conversation in that way,
I don't think it does. I think the conversation on the season has enlarged. Being eliminated from the Champions League kind of wrapped that up. I think, as much as I like Arteta and he's done great work, I do think he is going to feel, and not undeservedly, is going to start to feel some pressure. Because again, there's a lot to be said about the online discourse and fan conversations and all that, which exist in a totally different ecosystem, I think, than what the club itself is actually thinking. But I would not be surprised if he is going to start to feel a little pressure internally if we're having this same conversation a year from now. Yeah. If it's May 2026 and we're talking about how we didn't win anything again, but you can't just say it's as simple as that. Who knows? Maybe we do the thing that Liverpool did a couple of years ago, where they wind up with like the third highest point total in the history of the league. But Man City has the highest point total in the history of the league, and therefore they win it. And you play a titanic struggle against Barcelona or something in the Champions League quarterfinals, and you go out even though maybe because of an outstanding keeper performance. I don't know, but at a certain point, yeah, it is fair to sort of say, like, because the goal is not to just play well, the goal is to win things, and
right.
And it's going to become a problem down the line as we start looking at our key players. They want to win things. They only get one shot at this in their career. And if it's not going to happen here, or they don't start to think it really can't happen here, they're going to look elsewhere. And that's Saka, that's Saliba. Those are the guys we need to be at the center of that conversation. And if they're out, then, if they don't start to believe that, then we have a real problem.
Yeah, I hear you. So what's up for next week?
Home finale. We're down to the end. Home finale on Sunday, late morning, U.S. time against Newcastle. And at least as of today, that game will be on the USA Network. It would be nice to beat them. I'm a little tired of losing to Newcastle. Yes, that'll be Sunday. So last home game.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned USA Network. Let me just air one little gripe relative to my viewing experience today. So I was ready to watch this match around halftime of the match. And, I've been watching a lot of baseball, and I'm almost never starting one of those games from the very beginning. I usually join in the middle. But it always gives me the choice. Do you want to watch live, or do you want to watch it from the beginning? Yeah. And that's a really nice choice to have that Peacock doesn't afford you. And that really bothered me. So it jumped me into the middle of the match. And I knew that was a possibility because it didn't look like it was going to offer me that choice. So I kind of looked toward the bottom, and it turned out to be the halftime show. And I saw, Liverpool shots 6 and Arsenal shots 5. And I thought that was the score at first, which was really like, whoa, 6-5. What have I missed? And it's like, wait, no, it's shots. Okay. It doesn't actually spoil anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and it looked like that was the case on NBC Sports and Peacock, which is very frustrating. But anyways, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with a link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to subscribe on one of the platforms we're on. As a reminder, there's our podcast available wherever you listen to those, as well as YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter for our long-form and short-form videos. Long-form is only on YouTube. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Shake and bake.